Alright, fuckers and fuckettes, now what we're going to talk about today is why you go down to bare metal when you're painting a tank. I stopped on this one so I could actually show you. This is a tank off of a 59 Harley Sportster. Let me get this thing to where I can see to where you can see. See now, even though I've sanded this tank down, there's rust underneath. Now the paint on this tank was coming up from rust underneath, and this is an area where the paint was perfect, but there's still rust underneath and a little bit of pitting. And what would happen is if you didn't take that down to bare metal and smooth that out and get rid of that rust, a couple years from now your paint's going to come up and it's going to do the same thing it did the first time. Maybe you get 4 or 5 years out of it. I don't know, but I know that is what happens. It'll just do the same thing all over again. Because paint, even urethane paints, you get little porous pinholes and moisture does get under there, and it does make the rust worse eventually, not right away. But sanding it down to bare metal and taking off that remaining rust, this up in here is paint, but there's little rust spots all through here. Matter of fact, there's one right there too. I don't know if y'all can see that. I don't know if this camera's doing its thing, if the shit's too shiny or what, but I'm trying to show you. There's rust spots all in through there. That is not paint, that is rust. And that was underneath the paint. And there's little scores like right through here. You can see a deep rut, and there's rust down in it. Okay, this other side's a bad example. I haven't got to it yet. But like I say, I stopped just to show you that and kind of explain why you always sand these down to bare metal and take out any remaining rust pits. Now what I'll do to take out the remaining rust pits is, and I don't recommend this if you're not a careful person, but I'll use this shit. It's just 400 grit water dry. And I'll take some MEK instead of water, sand that down, let it oxidize a little bit, and then on the next stage I'll hit it dry with 1200 grit. And taking the paint off, all I'm using is P80 3M, that's the mean green. Shit's green, that's all I'm using to take this shit off with. Now, also taking it down to bare metal allows you to see, did somebody else patch this motherfucker in the past? And on a tank this old, I mean, this is a 1959 tank. This is 2012. So, I mean, you get a chance that somebody may have patched it along the way. 51-year-old fucking tank. God damn, 52-year-old tank. Almost 52 years old. God damn, it's the same age as me. Well, I won't be 52 till the 29th of this month, but and actually, really, I'm only going to be 13. That'll be my 13th actual birthday. But on a tank this old, chances are, somewhere along the line the bike got dropped or the bike sat out and somebody had to patch the tank. In little spots like this here on the back, I initially thought that this was where somebody had patched it with something, and thankfully I got lucky and all they had done was cover up the weld trying to make it pretty. So I got lucky on that. It wasn't a patch job. But if I hadn't have been sanding it down to the metal to look at it, I wouldn't have known that. Other little things, like I say, sand the fuckers down to bare metal. I mean, that's all you really need to know. And smooth them out, like I said, with some 400. If you're not a careful person, I'd recommend you use water. My reasoning for using the MEK is it does dissolve the rust, but you do have to be tediously slow. You cannot create sparks with your sandpaper against metal. You have to do that by hand. You cannot use a machine. I do not recommend that. I do not recommend the MEK method for somebody that is not a very careful person, and I do not recommend it without a fire extinguisher right there. But it works really well for me. I've done it for years. I learned that trick doing aircraft. But another, and I mean, you can do it just dry sanding it, but if you're just dry sanding it, that last stage, when I do the last final hit it with some 1200 to smooth everything up, I'm spraying it within an hour of hitting it with that 1200 to smooth up the metal. And always, that's something important actually, because say you hit it with your 1200 and you say, fuck it, I'm going home for the night, and then you come back in the morning and you spray it right away. You just fucked up, because there's going to be, even though it doesn't look like it, there's going to be a little teeny bit of surface rust. And that will build up underneath over the years, and it's the difference between a 2-year and a 200-year paint job. I'm exaggerating on the numbers, but you know what I mean. When you do your final sand, you spray within an hour, maybe 2 at the most. And that's just your primer. I'm not going to make any primer recommendations because I'm shooting urethane on this one. But little things like that, like taking it down and making sure that you get the rust out, it's the difference between people liking your work and not. I mean, I see a lot of guys, they're doing the same airbrush. I mean, a lot of these guys are using the same stencils I'm doing on the cheap shit. I mean, you come to me, you want a $500 tank, fuck it, I'm going to tell you to pick some stencils, I'm going to wipe that shit out in a day or two. You tell me to do something really nice and you're willing to pay me a couple $1,000s, I'll put your fucking picture on it. And most of that's done by hand. Keywords, most of that. But that's why a lot of, like, and Helmet Kid, don't get me wrong, he's a good friend, I like him, but, I mean, he'll do just surface sanding, knock you clear coat, just rough enough to where it'll hold paint. But, I mean, he's doing that in a, you see him at the cycle shows, you see him doing your helmets, you see him doing your tanks, and 30 minutes he's knocking out a couple of stencils, and he's charging you a couple $100 for doing it. But that's why he doesn't get much repeat business, is because it looks good for a couple of years, but unless somebody is anal about protecting that paint, it doesn't last more than a couple of years. Whereas the kind of work that I do, it'll last forever. I've got paint jobs from the 80s that are still out there floating around. Anyway, I hope that was a helpful hint, good explanation of why you take them down to bare metal all the way every time. If it wasn't, well, hopefully somebody will leave it in the comments and help this shit out or whatever, but I tried. Holler at y'all fuckers and fuckheads later.